Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're investigating a pattern that should alarm every American watching.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Tonight's investigation spans from the streets of Minneapolis to the halls of the European Parliament, from crypto exchanges in Vienna to film festivals in New York City. What connects them? Power operating in the shadows, and the brave individuals who dare to expose it.
We begin with two shootings in Minneapolis that have sent shockwaves through immigrant communities and raised urgent questions about federal law enforcement accountability. 2 people dead in less than 3 weeks. Both shot by federal agents. Both incidents captured on video. And both demanding answers that authorities seem reluctant to provide.
These aren't isolated incidents, Alex. They're part of a broader pattern we'll be examining tonight, where power operates with impunity, whether it's federal agents on American streets, authoritarian governments reaching across borders, or cryptocurrency exchanges evading oversight. The through line is the same: accountability is treated as optional.
Let's start with the most recent tragedy. On January 24, Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse at the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs healthcare system, was shot and killed by Customs and Border Protection agents on Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. According to Bellingcat's detailed analysis of the footage, this shooting came just 17 days after another fatal shooting by federal agents in the same city.
Think about that for a moment. Alex Pretti spent his professional life saving veterans, caring for those who served this country in our military. He was a healer working in one of our most demanding medical environments, the ICU. And he was killed by agents of that same government on a Minneapolis street. Bellingcat's open-source investigation has been meticulously analyzing the available footage to reconstruct what happened.
What we know from Bellingcat's reporting is that multiple videos captured this incident, just as they captured the shooting of Renee Good earlier this month. The existence of this footage is crucial, Maya, because without civilian recordings, we would have only the official narrative. Video evidence has become the essential tool for accountability when authorities investigate themselves.
And that earlier shooting, Alex, the one on January 7th, is equally disturbing. Renee Good was a 37-year-old mother of 3. She was shot and killed by a federal agent, this time ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, on Portland Avenue in Minneapolis. Bellingcat's forensic analysis of the footage that spread rapidly on social media has provided critical independent verification of what witnesses reported.
Let's be clear about what Bellingcat does, because their methodology matters here. They're not just watching viral videos. They're conducting systematic open-source investigations, geolocating footage, analyzing timestamps, comparing multiple angles, and building a factual record that can withstand scrutiny. This is the kind of accountability journalism that becomes essential when official investigations move slowly or lack transparency.
The pattern in Minneapolis is undeniable. 2 fatal shootings by federal agents in the same city within weeks of each other. Both victims in their 30s. Both incidents captured on video. Both raising serious questions about use of force protocols and the militarization of immigration enforcement on American streets. These weren't raids at the border. This is federal force deployed in a major American city, with lethal consequences.
And here's what makes this even more troubling. The spread of these videos on social media created immediate public awareness, but it also created a battleground of misinformation and competing narratives. Bellingcat's work cutting through that noise to establish verified facts is exactly the kind of independent journalism our democracy requires. When trust in official accounts is low, rigorous open-source investigation becomes the public's best tool for understanding what actually happened.
The families of Alex Pretti and Renee Good deserve answers. The communities of Minneapolis deserve answers. And frankly, Alex, every American deserves to know under what circumstances federal agents are authorized to use lethal force on our streets, and what accountability exists when they do.
We'll continue following Bellingcat's investigation as more details emerge. But now we need to turn to another form of power operating without adequate accountability, this time reaching across international borders. Maya, the European Union has just released a significant report on transnational repression, and it directly cites investigative journalism that exposed how authoritarian regimes target their critics abroad.
That's right, Alex. According to reporting from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, a new EU report is urging member states to take far more aggressive action against transnational repression. And significantly, this report cites ICIJ's own China Targets investigation as evidence of how serious this threat has become. This isn't an abstract policy debate. It's a response to documented cases of authoritarian governments harassing, surveilling, and intimidating people on European soil.
Let's define what we're talking about here, because transnational repression sounds bureaucratic, but the reality is terrifying. This is when a government like China reaches beyond its borders to silence critics, intimidate dissidents, and pressure anyone who dares to speak against the regime, even when those people have fled to democracies they believed would protect them. We're talking about surveillance, threats against family members still in the home country, cyber attacks, and in some cases, physical intimidation or worse.
The EU report's call for improved coordination across the bloc is an acknowledgement that individual European nations have been failing to address this threat adequately. When a dissident in Germany is being monitored by Chinese agents, and their family in China is being pressured by security services, that's not just a German problem or a Chinese domestic matter. That's an assault on the fundamental values of asylum, free expression, and human dignity that Europe claims to uphold.
And ICIJ's China Targets investigation provided the evidentiary foundation for this policy shift. This is a perfect example of how investigative journalism can drive institutional change. Reporters documented specific cases, exposed the mechanisms of transnational repression, and created a public record that policymakers could no longer ignore. The EU report represents officials finally catching up to what journalists had already proven.
But reports and recommendations only matter if they lead to action, Alex. The question now is whether European governments will actually implement more aggressive countermeasures, or whether this report will gather dust while dissidents continue to live in fear. The track record on that front is mixed at best.
Which brings us to perhaps the most vivid illustration of China's global reach that ICIJ has documented, the silencing of an independent Chinese film festival right here in the United States. Maya, this story is extraordinary because it shows transnational repression happening not in some distant country, but in New York City.
According to ICIJ's investigation, an independent Chinese film festival was abruptly cancelled in New York, and the circumstances reveal just how effectively Beijing and its proxies can pressure critics even in the heart of American cultural life. This isn't about films being banned in China. This is about Chinese government influence preventing films from being shown in Manhattan. Let that sink in.
The festival was designed to showcase independent Chinese cinema, the kind of artistic expression that can't exist within China's censorship system. These are filmmakers documenting the human cost of authoritarian policies, exploring taboo subjects, and preserving stories the Chinese government wants erased. The fact that even in New York, supposedly a global capital of free expression, this festival could be silenced tells us something profound about the reach of authoritarian power.
ICIJ's reporting documents the pattern of pressure, how venues were contacted, how sponsors were warned, how the infrastructure of intimidation operates. This isn't random. It's systematic. And it's part of the same apparatus documented in the China Targets investigation and now drawing alarm at the United Nations and the European Parliament. When the UN is raising concerns about a government's ability to silence critics on foreign soil, we're talking about a threat to the entire international order built on the idea that dissidents can find safe haven in free countries.
What's particularly insidious about this form of repression is how it weaponizes the openness of democratic societies. In China, the government controls venues, sponsors, and distribution channels directly. In the United States, they achieve similar results through economic pressure, threats to business relationships, and intimidation of diaspora communities. They found the vulnerabilities in our system and they're exploiting them ruthlessly.
And let's be honest about the complicity this requires. When a New York venue cancels a film festival because of pressure from Chinese sources, someone at that venue made a decision to prioritize whatever was being threatened, business relationships, access to Chinese markets, freedom from harassment, over the principle of free expression. That's a choice. And when enough institutions make that choice, self-censorship becomes the norm, and authoritarian values win without the authoritarian government having to do anything overtly.
The filmmakers and festival organizers who tried to make this event happen are themselves whistleblowers of a sort, people who risked their safety and their careers to preserve artistic expression and historical memory. Their silencing should outrage anyone who believes that American institutions should stand for something more than the path of least resistance.
We're seeing a theme emerge tonight, Alex. In Minneapolis, we have federal power used lethally with questions about accountability. In Europe and the United States, we have authoritarian power reaching across borders to silence dissent. And now we turn to our final investigation, which involves a different kind of power operating in the shadows, the largely unregulated world of cryptocurrency exchanges.
According to ICIJ's reporting, auditors at Bitpanda's German subsidiary flagged significant information security issues, and these concerns echo problems previously raised by regulators. Bitpanda is a major cryptocurrency exchange based in Vienna, and this investigation reveals a troubling gap between the company's public assurances and what internal auditors actually found.
Let's set the context here. Cryptocurrency was supposed to democratize finance, to create transparent systems that didn't require trusting opaque institutions. But what we've seen repeatedly, from FTX to smaller exchanges, is that the reality often involves the same old problems: inadequate controls, regulators playing catch-up, and ordinary people losing money when things go wrong. Bitpanda claimed it had addressed authorities' concerns about its operations. This internal audit report suggests those claims deserve serious scrutiny.
Information security isn't some technical footnote, Maya. For a cryptocurrency exchange, it's existential. These platforms hold people's money. If there are security vulnerabilities, that money can be stolen. If there are compliance gaps, the exchange can be used for money laundering, sanctions evasion, or financing criminal activity. When auditors at a company's own German subsidiary are raising red flags, that's a serious matter.
And this connects to the broader accountability theme of tonight's program. Cryptocurrency has grown into a multi-trillion-dollar industry while operating in regulatory gray zones. Exchanges like Bitpanda have aggressively expanded across Europe, obtaining licenses in various jurisdictions, while apparently struggling to meet basic information security standards. When your own auditors are echoing what regulators have already warned you about, that suggests a systematic problem, not a one-time oversight.
ICIJ and its media partners have done essential work here in obtaining and analyzing internal documents that contradict public narratives. This is exactly what investigative journalism is supposed to do: look behind the press releases and corporate assurances to find out what's actually happening. In a sector as opaque as cryptocurrency, where marketing hype often outpaces operational reality, this kind of reporting protects consumers and holds powerful financial actors accountable.
We should note that Bitpanda has disputed aspects of this reporting, as companies often do. But the existence of internal audit findings that align with regulatory concerns is itself significant. It suggests that whatever the company says publicly, there were people inside the organization documenting problems. Those auditors were doing their jobs. The question is whether management responded appropriately, and whether regulators have the tools to verify compliance.
This brings us to the synthesis of everything we've covered tonight, Maya. We started with federal agents using lethal force on Minneapolis streets, with accountability dependent on civilian video footage and independent open-source investigation. We examined how authoritarian governments reach across borders to silence dissidents, even in supposed free expression havens like New York City. And we looked at how a major cryptocurrency exchange may have misrepresented its compliance with security standards.
What connects these stories? In every case, we see power operating with inadequate oversight, and we see whistleblowers, journalists, and investigators working to shine light into those dark corners. The Bellingcat analysts piecing together what happened in Minneapolis. The ICIJ reporters documenting transnational repression and obtaining internal audit documents. The filmmakers trying to preserve Chinese independent cinema. The auditors who flagged security concerns at Bitpanda. These are all people taking risks to hold power accountable.
And in every case, we see the forces of opacity pushing back. Federal agencies investigating their own officers. Authoritarian governments using economic pressure to silence critics. Corporations making public claims that their own internal documents contradict. The struggle between transparency and secrecy, between accountability and impunity, plays out in countless forms, but it's fundamentally the same struggle.
The European Union's report on transnational repression is a hopeful sign that institutions can respond when journalists document abuses thoroughly enough. But reports don't change reality unless they're followed by action. The same is true for every investigation we've discussed tonight. Bellingcat's analysis matters only if it informs genuine accountability for the Minneapolis shootings. ICIJ's crypto reporting matters only if regulators use it to improve oversight.
And this is where you, our viewers, come in. Investigative journalism depends on public attention and public pressure. When these stories fade from view, so does the impetus for accountability. The families of Alex Pretti and Renee Good need the public to keep asking questions about what happened and why. Chinese dissidents need the public to push back against institutions that capitulate to Beijing's pressure. Cryptocurrency investors need the public to demand real regulatory oversight.
We often hear that we're living in a post-truth era, that facts don't matter anymore, that the public has become numb to scandals and abuses. Tonight's investigations show why that cynicism is wrong, or at least why it must be wrong. The truth still matters enormously to the people whose lives are affected by power's abuses. And the work of documenting that truth, whether through open-source video analysis, leaked documents, or traditional reporting, remains essential to any hope of accountability.
Bellingcat, ICIJ, and other investigative outlets are doing work that government agencies often fail to do and corporate media often lacks the resources to pursue. They're creating a public record that can't be erased or denied, evidence that will exist regardless of what official narratives emerge. That kind of journalism is a public good that we all depend on, whether we realize it or not.
Before we close, let's revisit the human dimension of these stories. Alex Pretti was a nurse who cared for veterans. Renee Good was a mother of 3. The filmmakers whose festival was cancelled were artists trying to preserve culture and memory. The auditors who flagged security problems were professionals doing their jobs conscientiously. These aren't abstractions. They're people whose lives intersected with systems of power in consequential ways.
And the people documenting these stories are taking risks too. Open-source investigators face harassment and legal threats. Journalists investigating authoritarian regimes put themselves and their sources in danger. Whistleblowers inside corporations risk their careers. The ecosystem of accountability that lets us know what's really happening depends on people choosing to take those risks, often for very little reward.
So tonight we ask our viewers to support that ecosystem. Read the full investigations from Bellingcat and ICIJ. Share them with people who might not otherwise see them. Push back when institutions try to sweep inconvenient truths under the rug. The struggle between transparency and secrecy is fought in millions of small moments, every time someone decides whether to look away or pay attention.
From Minneapolis to Brussels, from New York to Vienna, power is being wielded in ways that demand scrutiny. Tonight we've tried to provide some of that scrutiny, standing on the shoulders of investigators who've done the painstaking work of documentation. The stories aren't over. The Minneapolis shootings demand accountability. Transnational repression demands international coordination. Cryptocurrency oversight demands regulatory action.
Until those demands are met, we'll keep reporting. For Truth Report, I'm Maya Clarity.
And I'm Alex Truth. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, democracy depends on citizens who refuse to look away. Good night.